I'd like to reflect on the profound words of Greek philosopher Plato, who believed that art is essentially a reflection of what is real. Uh, Design fitting into well-defined bracket of form and function often navigates the delicate balance between aesthetics and utility. So today we explore this profound interplay between the reflective nature of artistic expression and its tangible impact. We explored the blurred lines between art and design, their intersection, and even their parallels. So let's get started. I do want to thank Priya for this, for having me on this panel, and she had really made the topic very simple for me, and I'm going to follow a lot of her. Priya, I don't know where you are, but hi. Okay, so design involves form, function, and intent, while art must only exist. Design has to solve problems, while art should provoke the thought and emotion, and sometimes even prompt uncomfortable observations and discussions. So while designers work methodically with a data-driven, logical, and mathematical process, artists work in a way that seems intuitive and abstract. Relying on instinct, I want to first ask Ashish, whose work I find right at the threshold of this yin and yang. Ashish, as a designer, what is the starting point for you, for function or design?
It's a tough question because it has changed over the period of my practice. And earlier I was very, very inclined towards form, and that's how I started using the different shapes that I'm trying to move away from. But now, as I go deeper into my practice, I'm more inspired by the crafts, the limitations of crafts, and that's where I'm finding deeper meaning of what is the real value of our heritage and how not to tamper with it beyond a certain point. But that said, there's obviously a sense of functionality that comes into everything, and with a sense of scale. Scale is really important.
Right. I want to move to Loïc. Loïc, you're redefining collectible design, the functional art. So tell me, where does Carpenters Gallery stand on this?
Well, we started 20 years ago with the idea that the actual object, the functionality of the object was not that relevant. And we like the idea that you should be looking at an object, look at its form, look at the language, the emotional journey that an artist wants to convey. No one needs me, no one needs us to come up with another dining table, another chandelier. There's too many of it. We don't need more of stuff, but we all need a beautiful story. We all need something which is going to be meaningful, where the artist is trying to say something. So I guess I'm not a gallerist or a design gallery, but we are people helping artists to convey beautiful stories.
So amidst the push and pull of art and design, I'd like to understand if collectors are as comfortable investing in collectible design as they have been traditionally with art. That's for you, Loïc.
Well, there's been, for the past 20 years, a huge level of education. Look at the magazine, Elle, Decor, AD. You have tons of it. So there's been a huge work of education which has been done when it comes to collectible design. Look at the auction houses, Christie's, Sotheby's, Phillips. They have almost a quarter of their sales which is promoting collectible design. So this was pretty new. So over the 20 years, there's been a huge level of awareness, and suddenly people realize that they can live with exceptional piece of design, and those pieces now, because there's a market, have reached some real prices. And not only you can live with exceptional artistic pieces, but most of them have become some meaningful asset and prove very often a good investment on the same level of some important contemporary artists.
Greg, I want to ask you this. So functional art is more than a trend. I perceive it as a movement. How do you see this taking shape in the near future?
I think there's, yeah, you're correct. It is a movement, and it's a movement in aesthetics in general, where be it in fashion or art or furniture or design, where every experience, whether it's with a bottle or our iPhone, we want it to be a pleasurable experience, and the objects around us have to be so bring us so much joy in our bedroom, in our in the car. We're such a pleasure-oriented society right now that the idea of function, like living in a society where everything is only functional, is so boring, and it's not the way society is going. Our society is obsessed by aesthetics, which will give us pleasure, and we'll be a happier sort of society for that reason, I think.
So I have a follow-up question on the same, Greg. So can art and design have a happy marriage, or do you feel that art cannot deal with that, relationship status and would rather remain, by itself open or polygamous?
I mean, I think art and design have an absolutely happy relationship. They are very similar. It's about aesthetics that give us joy. It's only in sort of a tiny niche platform like this where there's a bit of tension between art and design, and I think that's market related, and I think that's galleries being a bit scared of, oh my gosh, all the architects are going to buy design from Carpenters and Ashiesh rather than art anymore. But in actual fact, it's the same thing, and and that's to do with that's also about the idea of producing collectible objects, like in the way that art is collectible. There's a market for it. It's particularly wanted. They're just market forces. Sorry.
Okay. So this one question, I have it open for all. I want all of you to answer. It's fairly simple. I just want to understand what is an ideal relationship between art and design. Who wants to go?
It's interesting because in a way I've always been fighting this concept of differentiating art and design. And I think this suits the press, the magazine. So you can have a section here. And you guys like to put us in boxes. But if you remember Duchamp and the ready-made, basically he was the first one to tell us that anything can be anything. And in reality, are you suggesting that the fact that an object can have a level of functionality makes it less artistic? Some of you might remember an exhibition we did at the Venice Biennale 4 years back, and it was called Dysfunctional. And it was about questioning the relevance of functionality in the object versus dysfunctionality. And I think it's a very relevant question. Does functionality makes it less interesting, less collectible, less intellectually relevant? So I guess I answered your question.
You want to answer?
So a great friend of mine just told me before I came onto the stage today that it's very simple, this argument. Art is purely selfish. The moment that you start creating something for somebody else, then it's not art. So if you're, I don't know, Jitish, and all of a sudden somebody's asked Jitish for a painting which is slightly larger, he's created it for somebody else. It's not truly, it's his artwork, which I thought was a really interesting perspective. However, how I sort of perceive the relationship between art and design is kind of in a room like, I like to refer to Brancusi's Atelier always, like an idea that you're in this room and there's objects, there's artworks, there's humble pieces, there's shapes, and that's how we all live. It's how I live. It's where you put a tree. It's where you put your coffee table, and that sense of and that feeling and ambiance that you've created. That's the relationship between art and design in my life, anyway.
I'm going to take from Brancusi, and when you speak of Brancusi, you can't not speak of Noguchi. And now, where was the bracket there? There was no bracket there. Art and design is bracketless, and anything creative should be bracketless. The difference for me between art and design is, I'm going to take again from the whole idea of the mind of the artist, but design is a more inclusive process. Artists can be very insular. while design is more inclusive, you involve many more people within that piece, and that makes it even more beautiful. It's a collaborative effort. Sometimes you make it yourself, sometimes you make it with craft, sometimes you make it with technology, and that is the beauty of it. And I don't see anything in a bracket where I feel like this should be art and this should be less art or more art. Because when I walk around fairs, and not this fair, but every fair, I feel most artists make design objects. They're always something that has a formulaic value, and then they just build over it to make it more accessible and more sellable. So I think then that is a big question.
So coming back to a little bit of practicality, from utility to expression, Ashish, I want to know, what is the starting point for you? Is it function, design? How do you go about it as a designer?
I actually don't think of function when I start. I think function is something that's ingrained in me because I'm an architect. And I think function is something that just happens because it's something that is a very natural process. What is tougher for me is to navigate between crafts and to find out my language within that craft and make it, especially because I work in a very strong soft power of this country, which is the crafts world, and which has been so underrated and undervalued for generations now. My whole goal is to see how I can make crafts into a magnanimous scale, which is now currently being seen, and that's what Indians are appreciating. I think most of the people who talk to me say that we never expected Indian crafts to come to this scale and platform. And so functionality is always there, but it's never, I don't think by saying I will make a wash basin. I make something and say, oh, maybe this could be a wash basin, or this could be a dining table, or this could just be something that's lying there and the observer decides what to do with it.
Okay, I want to touch upon materiality and craftsmanship because since you are on craft, so I do feel that, beyond form and function, how an intrinsic beauty or a story of a materials and the skills of artisans elevate an object for design, or it just elevates the entire product. So can Greg, you share any collaborations with artisans that you have that have resonated with our audience on an artistic level?
So sure. So at Jaipur Rugs, actually, we have a project called the Manchaha project, which is where we don't collaborate with a designer, actually. So it's the idea that the weaver themselves, they're just allowed to weave whatever is in their head. And they're not a trained designer, and actually they don't, they're living in rural Rajasthan, they don't have access to culture or art, they don't have any references as such. And so, and yet, so we give them this freedom to, instead of following a design, create what they like. And it's incredible seeing what comes out of that, and it's often very beautiful, and that's actually very inherent. And sometimes they will refer to what was the inspiration, and it is simply what they've seen in life, which is they saw the farm or they saw sunsets, and that's all they know. And it's so beautiful to see, and those objects are actually some of our most celebrated. One of them made the Loève Craft Prize. We didn't put it under the company name. We just entered it under the name of mine and Debbie. It had nothing to do with Jaipur Rugs. I mean, that's quite incredible to get that far in a competition like that with a jury which is really looking at the parameters correctly. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting when you don't have a designer, when it's only the craftsperson.
That's quite interesting. Now, I want to understand the designer's point of view. Ashish, you work with the Longpi pottery in Manipur, and tell us about the collaboration and how has it been when you get involved with their knowledge.
When we started working, sorry to interrupt, but when we started working with Lompi, it was a craft in Manipur, which is a very, very remote area. It takes days to reach there. And for generations, they could not go beyond about 10 inches. And it was a very tough process to first talk to them, speak to them, convince them that here we are to make something new, because they're so stuck in the mold of saying that this is what we know and this is what we do. So first we had to break that boundary, make smaller pieces, and then break that mold and go up to about this high, which had never been done ever in the history of the craft. And that was the journey that really I enjoyed, because we had to make a new kiln, we had to work with them. It would come back broken, it would just not work, the temperature was not right, the weather conditions were not right, and that was beautiful. Another thing I want to speak about, because I did a collaboration with Jaipur Rugs, and this is a beautiful story. So I think during COVID, we did a collaboration which we call Brahman, and it was about the universe, and they were about indigo. And we did an entire collection with the designs, with the crafts community. I, in fact, went to the village and worked with them. And we had a storytelling sessions, and we did this beautiful video with them, where we narrated stories to each other from our lives. And after we finished the collection, Yogesh said, Ashish, would you mind if we ask the craftsmen to interpret what they feel about you and the collection after the collection's over? So we did a drop of unique pieces of banchahas, what Greg is talking about, of their response to my work. And I think those were the most beautiful pieces. And that's where the real collaboration between crafts and design comes into.
Right. Like you work with Eindhoven artists. I had a chance to visit Eindhoven, and some of my favorite designers come out of Eindhoven. And I wanted to understand, in the collaborations that you have worked, how do you navigate the complexities of crafting a design? I mean, considering it requires more than just a keen eye for function and aesthetics, but also demands an understanding of materials, engineering principles, and much more. So how do you navigate?
Allow me to respond in sort of two ways. First of all, I think craft is just a vehicle to achieve the vision. So I would say, in a provocative way, in a way, craft is not that relevant. When you look at Donald Judd, the craft is incredibly simple, and he expressed something incredibly powerful. So I see craft as a vehicle. It's needed in order to deliver beautiful objects. But at the end of the day, what I'm interested in is the vision and what came from the heart of the artist. In a way, whether it's a blank page of paper or a black canvas, which is slashed like Fontana did it. Sort of, in a way, there's no craft, but at the end of the day, the result is so powerful. So craft is important, but I just see it as a vehicle. A lot of artists come up with some very technically complicated ideas, and then, of course, we need to help them, and of course, then craft becomes relevant. So it's also part of the job of a gallery to give them some technical answers, and some of you might know that we at Carpenters Workshop Gallery, not only we have the gallery side, but we also incorporated our own elite artisan studio outside Paris, where we have about 60 artisan working marble, leather, wood, all kind of bronze, aluminum. So we're here to help them to be able to push the boundaries in terms of what do they want to express from an artistic point of view. So it's totally fascinating, but once again, it is just a tool to be able to deliver their vision and what they express emotionally. Because at the end of the day, once again, the only thing which is relevant about what we show is, are we going to put in front of you an object which has a story, it's going to say something, going to move you.
Right. So since we are on the point of complexities, I'd like to ask you, Loïc, do constraints of functionality or problem solving serve as limitations, or they become the catalysts for creativity?
Challenges are very often, there's many examples. The more challenges and the more mistakes you make in the making of the object, very often turn into be able to stretch the boundaries and come up with an object which you never really thought would be possible. So there are challenges, but of course today there's a lot of different tools which allows you or allows the artist to go very, very far technically. I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion, but just go and have a look on our booth, and you're going to see this console called the Cinderella table, which was sculpted from a solid block of marble. When you look at it, without the modern tools and the modern technique, it would be totally impossible to produce such an artwork. And yet, you look at something which looks incredibly simple, incredibly beautiful, but it is thanks to your use of all modern technique and elite craftsmen, which allows us to deliver such artworks.
Right. So, Greg, coming to you, what are the challenges that you foresee, and how important is it to push boundaries, get uncomfortable, or break away from the expectations?
I mean, I think just people, the consumer wants to get everything to be fresh. So in order for fresh things to happen, you have to push the boundaries. And be that with material or the way or the form or how it's marketed or all of that storytelling. But yeah, freshness, it's like fashion. Freshness is so important, and essentially any aesthetic industry is like that.
Ashish, as a designer, what challenges do you see, and how do you navigate your work when it comes to any unforeseen?
I think one of the biggest challenges is to produce something that's unseen, something that's new, something that's fresh, something that doesn't feel dated, but at the same time have a reference point, know your history, know your culture, know your craft, know where exactly the starting point is. For example, if I'm working with a particular aesthetic for a collection, I need to be able to show its limitations, the point of maximum. And although that is sometimes very relative, in my head, I know that the challenges are very, very, very relative, especially if you know where you want to take this piece. So for example, if I were to say that I want to make a piece that can go up 30 feet, what is it that I can use with respect to technology to make it happen? And does it even need it, or can I work with an ancient craft to make that happen?
Right. In fact, Ashish, you started the fund during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I wanted to just touch upon that from then, pre-pandemic to now. How has the crafts community evolved in today's world?
I think the crafts community is really it's very special time, because suddenly there is a whole new resurgence of the love of craft, I think, and not only in design but also in fashion, many different forms. And so I think most crafts communities are very busy, which is the most beautiful part of it. So it started there, and today now I think it's a flourishing industry on its own.
Wow. I mean, I think it's incredible that you started then, and now most of your creations are collaborations with various craftspeople, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you touched upon Manchaha, Greg, but I had a chance to experience the village and the workers, and I feel like it embodies like dialogues, because each and every creation has joy, sorrow, celebration, depending on the story of the weaver. So has the community evolved with such initiatives? What has been the experience behind the weaver?
I mean, the weaver at Jaipur Rugs is just the most important person in the system, in fact. So Jaipur Rugs has 40,000 people working on 7,000 looms
Wow.
across India.
Yeah.
It's decentralized. There's no sort of major factory. It's all sort of small weaving centers outside of people's homes, maybe 4 or 5 per village. It's extraordinary to see. And when we have sort of collaborated with artists, and we're going to do a lot more collaborations with artists, and that's for lots of reasons. We see a massive sort of surge in interest in textile art, so that's something that we want to be part of. But also, it's just a case of the weaving itself, like innovations in weaving, can only be done if you introduce an artist or a designer or an industrial designer into that sort of very traditional weaving community, where they've been doing the same things for hundreds of years and be like, okay, maybe actually we'll do it like this, and it'll be either easier or it'll look prettier, or and then they might react. But it's a very important part, the innovation, because it's such a huge workforce that they can't all just be weaving the same way. In fact.
While since we are on that, when I saw the Lorenzo Vicciuri collaboration with Jaipur rugs, to me it was a collectible piece of rug, which was absolutely unconventional as a rug. I wanted to know your views on that.
Oh, absolutely. I think they were unique pieces. They were designed to be collectible pieces.
And how did the artist, the weaving community, react to something which is not going on the floor but going on the wall?
So I mean, I think they love to see it. At Jaipur Rugs, we include the weavers and everything as well. So we make sure they come to head office and see what we've done. We make sure they see our Instagram and see what we did, and we took the carpets to the top of the mountain, or we put them in a gallery, and they're sort of shocked to see it. And of course, they love that. They're there in Rajasthan, and it's so lovely for them to think that the weaving has gone to, I mean, that piece by Mina Devi, it went to the Noguchi Museum in New York. And so
Wow.
explaining that to her, and then it went back to Jaipur, and it's currently in the store right now.
Do they fathom what their work has done, globally? Does it like, how do they react?
Yeah,
That is my interesting
don't-
question. It's
I
not in the
don't-
script, but
yeah,
I wanted
don't
to ask.
I mean, I'm not sure they fathom sort of design-wise globally, but they do fathom that the company values them like that. You must have seen a recent shoot we did recently where we had our village cricket team play on a field of carpets, which was a creative idea, and it was a shoot campaign, but it's actually much more than a campaign, because it's about including our workforce, our weavers, who made the carpets in the storytelling, and they love to see that. And of course, they're all on Instagram, in fact.
So that brings me to a very simple question, which I want all three of you to answer. Do you think design needs to fulfill a social responsibility? You want to go first, or Ashish, or you?
I mean, at Jaipur Rugs, it does have to, of course, because we're looking after a workforce and giving employment to so many people that, of course it does. But do I think design in general, does it have to? No, I strongly believe that design is about the joy from the form, and the joy that I get from seeing an object and what it looks like. And it can be just a rock, it can be an egg, it can be a tree. But in a company perspective, of course I do.
All right. Ashish, what do you
I
think?
think it's very personal. I think every practice has their own way of looking at it. Our practice, I can speak for, is very, very rooted in the whole idea of craftsmanship, because we started that way before. Atelier used to be more of a research cell before it started the whole idea of making objects. And I think our journey comes from there. And our relationships with the craftspeople has been so ingrained. Like Noor Salma, who's making our Chana Patna beads, is someone I've worked with for years. And we were also, in fact, part of the JSW Crafts Prize at one point. And I think that journey has been very, very, very personal. And what we create out of it is obviously something that changes over time. But the start point remains the same. So for me, the craftsmanship and the whole idea of bringing crafts to Indian design in my practice is very important.
Right. Loïc, I wanted to, check with you that how does the demand of collectible design differ from the art market that has always been historically way more organized?
I mean, once again, it goes back to what I was saying previously. It's a very new market, and especially this concept of collectible design, very sort of functional sculpture is something very new. 15 years ago, it's a market which didn't really exist, apart from a rather organized sort of historical market with the like of Prouvé, Perriand, Le Corbusier, and the Italian and the Brazilian market. So it's difficult. I don't have any views. I just know that collectors with an appetite for the art are genuinely looking at matching the quality in their furniture in their homes with the quality of what they have on their walls. And not only they get a great pleasure from it, they get some rare and scarce pieces, which allows them also to differentiate themselves from the guy next door. And it has proven that design at its, the collectible design at the sort of highest form has proved a very interesting way of diversifying your investment. To look at what's happening with Giacometti or Lalanne, and no one thought that 10 years ago a mirror for Lalanne could reach $1 million. So good designers in limited edition.
Design, art, and craft are converging, and initiatives like India Art Fair effectively bridge the gap within the design community. I wanted to collectively understand, are we progressing in the right direction?
In terms of fairs, I mean,
Yes.
there's a
Are
lot
we,
of,
as a community, are we moving in the right direction when it comes to design, art, and
oh, absolutely, and particularly in India. I mean, how exciting to be in India
it's
right
almost
now.
becoming a shaken mixture, so to say.
Yeah, it's a shaken mixture. Every week or every month, there's a new fair in India, which is wanting to be a little bit of art, a little bit of design, a little bit of luxury. It's a great. I mean, it's part of the India story, which is happening right now. I mean, just a little anecdote on the side. President Macron was here last week, right? And I know for a fact he met 10 people in Jaipur. Two were embroiderers, two were jewelers, and one was also involved in design. It's an industry, and it's an incredible time to be celebrating these things. And I mean, apparently we're all going to be making lots of money from it as well. I very much hope that will trickle down as well to craftspeople and people like me, I hope also.
What do you think, Ashish?
I sit between being a designer and being an entrepreneur. So for me, it's a very interesting question, because how do we see ourselves going further, especially in a country like ours where design is suddenly, we're seeing a renaissance, we're seeing a revolution, right? We didn't have an industry before 2000. And in the last 20 years, 23 years, there are more designers than I've ever seen in my lifetime, and in every field. But that said, the platforms are lots, but they are not curated enough. So I think that is the big question. Are these platforms well curated? I mean, this is a great platform, India Art Fair, because you see they have made sure that everybody who's participating has a certain standard. And that's very important. So I think that's going to be the future of curation. The role of a curator is going to be even more important now.
So coming to the curators bit, Loïc, I wanted to understand, how do you pick a designer? Like Ashish is with you, and you have some fabulous designers. I wanted to understand, how do you pick a designer, or what potential do you see? What is it that connects, and how do you go about it?
It's an interesting question. Inevitably, when you choose to become a gallerist, the job of a gallerist is to express a flavor. And we receive a lot of images all the time, and my business partner and I will look at everything, and we are going to decide whether what we see is the flavor of the gallery, because it's got to be a true representation of what the artist wants to express. But as a gallerist, you make choices. You come with a voice, and your voice needs to be genuine. It shouldn't be opportunistic. So I'd like to believe that when you come to the gallery or on my booth, you're going to like some pieces. You might not like some others, but at least you will understand why I made this choice. And I think that the voice, the flavor of Carpenter's workshop is clear. The language is clear. And I think this is what is marvelous about this job is precisely to be able to be committed in terms of your vision and remaining true to your vision, and therefore be able to deliver something honest, genuine to the people who trust you.
Right. Greg, I have a different question. I mean, it's connected to you've took on a role as artistic director. Company that has consistently been working with artisans. I wanted to understand what are going to be the guiding principles from your end now that you have joined, and I wanted to see what's your vision. How do you navigate between traditional and modern?
So, I mean, that's an interesting question because I think Jaipur Rugs is such a big company and we're looking at traditional and modern, and maybe we'll separate them somehow. Antique carpets are so fashionable, and they don't have a forum and they're not at fairs. So maybe that's something we'll separate. But in terms of designers that will collaborate, I mean, I feel a real responsibility that we have 40,000 weavers to employ, and they should be working with the world's greatest designers. And the wonderful thing is the world's greatest designers also feel that responsibility. So the conversations that we're having and the people that you'll see in the next year, I mean, they're not small names. They're sort of like big names, and it's quite.
You're not going to give any names out yet.
Not any names, no.
Okay.
I'll be shot.
Okay, so coming to that, Ashish, I wanted to understand how do you, perceive yourself as a designer or artist?
Wow, that's it's bracketless actually. I don't want to be bracketed. I studied I studied architecture, but I don't think the mind it cannot be placed into a slot, right? Some days I want to produce A, some days I want to produce B, but the only commonality that you will see is my language. What I want to say is my bracket will be my language. What is Ashish and what is not, and that's very important for me. That everything I produce should have some kind of language that I believe in.
So how do you honor the legacy of the traditional craftsmanship in your work? How far do you mold them to contemporary design? Without,
I think, for example, firstly, we would never want to kind of abuse it, right? It's very important to make sure that the craftspeople that are working on my pieces, and I'm talking about the pieces that are made in craft villages, we don't want to displace them. The first idea is to not displace them, to make them work within their environment, with their families, around their friends, then leave their community the way it is. But at the same time, we want to challenge them, but not beyond a point. So if we'd ask them if they can do something beyond what their capacity is, if they're ready to do it, yes. But if they're not, for example, Channapatna cannot go beyond a 6-inch length. And because of that, we had to go to create scale. We had to create beads. And that's the whole idea of manka, which means a bead, but also means from the heart. And that's the whole philosophy we want to follow. Let it be a comfortable and a happy marriage.
Happy marriage it is. Okay, I have one more before we open it to audience questions. So in the context of today's consumers, are they actively approaching their purchases, with the really heightened sense of awareness of materials or, genuine commitment to environmental consciousness? Or is it still more of a discussed ideal than practiced reality?
I think that sustainability is 100%. It's in everybody's mind, and I maybe not so much the environment, but as there's two parts to sustainability. One is the environment. I'm not sure that concerns. I think that concerns people younger than me, but the conditions of a workforce and how much people are paid and that they were paid correctly. I think that touches everybody, and I think nobody wants to touch a product that you think was not made correctly or ethically, and so that every company is working in that way now.
I know this sustainability question is always there. So I wanted to know, Ashish, how do you, there is a surge of a lot of organic materials and, there is a movement in direction, but do you really see that happening actively, or we are still at a nascent stage?
I think we can go on and on about it, but it's also to know how not to abuse it and not to waste. I think we waste a lot. As consumers, there's a lot. I think there needs to be how much one wants to use from what's available. And I think that's our main goal at the Atelier. Don't overuse produce or anything that is not going to be eventually a product also, you know. So I think for us, we go back and forth a lot before we actually manufacture something, and that's one of the main reasons why we cannot produce beyond a certain point.
Wonderful. That is from me. We'll open this to audience questions. If anybody has for my panels, I'm happy to pass the mic around. Yeah, there's someone right here in the first row.
Hi, I just have a quick question. Working with galleries and museums across the world, one of the things that innately comes is don't touch the artwork. Don't touch it. It is unique. And then there's dangers of conservation questions that keep coming up, especially with higher costs, and it's just unique nature of it. When you add design and functionality, you're encouraging people to fight that urge, but also not damage the work. So can you give an advice on how somebody can go around that? Sorry.
It's interesting because actually, I think one of the beauty of design precisely is the fact that you have a physical relationship with the object, and very often a good artworks, when you look at it, the first thing you want to do is you want to come and touch it, and the physical relationship you have with it, it's part of the experience. So by all means, come on my booth and come and caress all the objects.
I have a point to that. I think the idea of touch is so important. And at the same time, touch is different from use, right? And obviously abuse. Today, if I've been a big fan of Pierre Jeanret's work, Corbusier's work. I did a show for the closing party of India Art Fair almost a decade ago, showing that work, and that was the first time it was shown in an Indian platform. Today, when I own some of those pieces, I enjoy the scratches, I enjoy the marks, I enjoy the touch, which was used before me. So for me, that age is very important, and that's the beauty of design. It'll age with time, and if it's well made, it will have a patina, which will be the real price of that work.
I mean, I always say, you can
Yes,
walk
go
on the
ahead.
carpet, roll on the carpet, go for it.
I don't think the other booths in the fair are going to appreciate that. But any more questions? Yeah, there on this third row.
Hi, thank you for the amazing information. My question was, you know how when we work with craftsmen who've been practicing antique or old ancient practices, where would you draw the line between, antique craftsmanship looks a certain way, it has certain types of, specialties. So where is the line between modernizing that design into works of art and keeping that authentic old look to the craft in new works of art?
So I feel crafts is, antiques is different from crafts. So I feel like if a craft piece was made a particular era or whatever, then probably that would be the antique value of it or vintage value of it. Crafts is about the hand and about the skill, and I think it's very important to bring that to our generation. Today, what was aesthetic 50 years ago might be old-fashioned, for our generation. And so what we try to do, and I'm speaking from my perspective, what we try to do is bring crafts with our language to our generation, and without abusing it, without having to tell them to go the other direction. We are working in that flow. We're going with their stream. We're not pushing them. It's a slow process. It's something that they're comfortable with. And so if I think it's ethical for me, if I'm being, as we said, a happy marriage with them, and we both are benefiting, one getting employment and one getting their dream realized, I think it's a great marriage.
Any more questions? Anybody? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Ashish, Greg, Loïc. In the convergence of ideas, we covered themes of craftsmanship, artistry, design, which truly blurs the boundaries between the fields. However, one narrative thread that that continued throughout was the emotional connection between the designer and the maker. That is celebrated by the eye of collector. I think that is what I feel truly. And in this extraordinary exchange of energies, the legacy of art and design permeates through world across geographical and cultural boundaries, encouraging originality and the innovation of triumph. I think the emotional connect will always make or break the piece. And on that note, thank you once again for your time. And all of you for joining me on this panel. I hope everybody enjoyed, and thank you, Art Fair, India Art Fair team.